So here's a question. Who are you? What kind of person are you? What are the characteristics that make you you? I'm pretty sure most of us have a pretty good idea of who we are. But some people like to have a more objective or more professional description of who they are apart from their own personal perspective. Personality tests provide just this. You answer a simple questionnaire and it tells you what kind of person you are and defines your personality. Now, the word personality actually comes from the Greek word prosopon, which means a face or mask. So just as the actors from Greek theater used to wear masks before an audience to reveal their emotional state or their character to the audience, the personality of each of us is all the traits that collectively make up our distinctive character, and this personality is what we show to others. It's like the face that others see. So originating in the early 1900s, personality tests are used to categorize people into personality types based off certain psychological traits that they portray. Throughout this speech, we hope to present to you a brief history of personality tests, their usage, and why you should not always trust them. Now, the definition of a personality test is a questionnaire or other standardized instrument designed to reveal aspects of an individual's character or psychological makeup. Now, there are two major types of personality tests. The first is called a projective test. This type of test assumes that personality is primarily unconscious, and therefore it is better accessed through an indirect manner. In this type of test, it reveals hidden emotions and internal conflicts of the individual, such as their personality characteristics, their fears, their doubts, and their attitude. In this kind of test, the professional will respond how the subject responds to ambiguous stimuli, such as abstract visuals. One of the most common is the ink blot test. The professional will show the subject the ink blot and ask them to describe what they see. Another common way is for the professional to show the subject a vague picture or a scene, and they'll ask the subject to tell a story based on what they see. So the professional will analyze their responses and from that determine their personality type. However, one criticism for this type of test is that it's largely left up to the interpretation of the professional rather than the participant. Since the participant isn't really answering any direct questions, it's up to the professional to interpret their responses to come up with their personality type. The second type of personality test is the objective test. This type assumes that personality is conscious, contrary to the last one, and that it's best accessed through direct questions. So this type of test measures the personality of an individual through a self-report questionnaire where the individual themselves actually answers direct questions. And these types of tests use a restricted response format. So instead of being an open-ended question where the subject can write whatever they want, they only have limited options for their responses. One example is the ordinal scale ratings, which is basically where we'll have a scale of 1 to 10, or maybe 1 to 5, 1 to 3, whatever, how many. And it'll be like from the lowest number to the highest for 10. And they'll rate each question or statement that they receive based on how well they relate to it or degree of how it relates to themselves. And then also there's the typical true or false questions. However, this type of personality test also has some criticism because if they want to, the participant could lie on the question in order to create a more favorable score on their personality. Regardless of which type is the most accurate, both have been very widely used since they were first developed in our recent history.
Now, I believe, regardless of objective or projective tests, all of us in this room are college students and hope to better ourselves through knowledge. We hope to grow and better ourselves in the pursuit of knowledge. However, I believe it's an interesting concept that you can't put numerical and logical pursuits in personality. It's almost a metaphysical investment of time and energy to make yourself better. Now, the idea of a personality assessment is a truly very old concept throughout human history. Some of the world's earliest texts are purposed to teach valuable personality traits such as, or some of the literature that teaches personality traits, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Bible, and the Iliad, all serve to teach personality traits, such as honor, respect, justice, and civic duty, which all serve to better humanity as a whole. Now, we all wish to have these qualities. However, what makes a person lazy? What makes a person good and honest? We don't really know the numerical number that determines this. It's more in your heart and your head. And human emotions are by nature constantly changing, evolving, and are difficult to catalog with numerical data. Now, it wasn't until the 19th century that modern laboratory settings allowed us to put numerical measurements upon the previously almost pseudoscience that is dissecting personalities of a person. Now, the first personality test was created by Woodworth, and his test was called the Woodworth Personality Data Sheet. It was created in World War I to assess American soldiers in order to determine if they are more susceptible to shell shock. The following picture is a person that's experiencing shell shock, and it's essentially a nervous breakdown during the trenches of World War I, where soldiers would break down, they would cry, they couldn't handle anything. Woodworth Test was purposed to assess if they were more likely to break down from this shell shock. The science was very new, and the American Psychological Association, which funded Woodworth, was only 25 years old. The test contained 116 questions, which were yes or no answer questions. It was an objective test where only yes or no answer was taken, and it wasn't projective, as she was talking about previously. The main purpose of the test was to point insecurities to the test taker. It wasn't necessarily a personality test, as it was, it would pick out features of your personality which were considered weak in the Army. The questions consisted of things such as, would you feel uneasy within confined quarters? Would you feel uncomfortable crossing bridges? And would you feel comfortable with loud noises such as trains? In 1921, the Rorschach inkblot test was introduced as a projective test. This is the first image of the Rorschach test, the first group of it. Basically what you do is you ask the patient what he sees or what she sees in the inkblot test. And as you can tell, there's no real answer to the test. It's not very scientific in that there's no definite answer, there's no numerical answer to the situation. But what the professional takes from your opinion of the inkblot test determines what you are as a person, your personality. The images were for the patient, and the issue with the test was that some people would see different things, and it's up to the overseer, the psychologist, to determine what the person is thinking. So if you say, I see a rabbit in this picture right here, it's up to the professional to decide what that means. So there's some discrepancy within the test. However, it's still used very popularly in American psychology, and today around 80% of psychological graduate programs require their students to learn how to administer the Rorschach test. Modern personality tests are centered on Jung's word association theory, which was developed in 1921. Now, the test consisted of questions such as, if I say father, what's the first word that comes to your mind? Now, like the previous test, it's a projective test where the answer is dependent on the patient. Now, once again, this test is a little fishy because it's up to the professional to decide what that person's thinking. But in the future, there was another test that was made called the Myers-Briggs test, made by these two ladies, Isabel Briggs-Myers and Catherine Cook-Briggs, which developed the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test, or MBTI. Now, the purpose of the test is to measure numerically how people perceive the world and make decisions based on their personality. Now, this test is more objective than the previous two tests, but it's still considered a good test. Now, the test measures the four dichotomies, which is the splitting of two parts, the single dichotomy. You have extroversion, which is being outgoing, which is over here, being extrovert, or you have inversion, which is being solitary. So you either typically are a more solitary or a more outgoing person. Now, over here is the sensing and intuition section. Now the sensing rely on perception, while the intuition rely on more like a gut feeling. Thinking is more logical, the feeling is more emotional, and the judging and perception are a little bit of logic and emotion, but a little different. Now, the Myers-Briggs test, you take a test, and depending on your answers, you score a certain percentage in each corridor. Now, depending on what you score, you're going to get one of these personality types, and it's supposed to determine what you are as a person more likely to do. If you're more likely to be solitary, more likely to be outgoing, you're more likely to enjoy science, more likely to enjoy theater, stuff like that. It's basically trying to figure out what your core values are. Now this test, the MBTI, was the first true personality test which was given commonly to ordinary citizens. The previous tests were given to soldiers, prisoners, or psychiatric patients. It was more like the Rorschach test and the Woodworth Test were more, you have something wrong with you, we're trying to find it out, where the MBTI is more, we're going to try to figure out what your personality is. In 1943, the MMPI, or Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory, was introduced in order to assist psychologists in assessing personality types in a clinical setting. Well, the purpose of this test was to diagnose patients with issues, but also to treat them. Through the 1950s and 1970s, personality tests were developed for multiple different purposes, such as the 16 personality factors by Raymond Cattell in the late 40s, which was purposed to account for the majority of trait functions such as introverts and extroverts, and that built upon the Myers-Briggs test right here. Another was developed in the 60s by Ernest Toops and Raymond Kristall, which was the 5-factor model. Now, the challenge in all these personality tests being created is that many of them create biases for the person who's creating the test. They mainly had missions they were trying to accomplish. They were trying to figure out if you were more unstable in certain aspects, which resulted in a lot of these tests not being neutral and clinical, but rather seeking to pick out a specific purpose. Now, starting in the 70s, but continuing on into the modern era, corporations and governments started creating personality tests in order to essentially diagnose workers and unionizers and stuff like that. So, like unions would ask their union workers to take tests in order to figure out who would be a better leader and stuff. But it was used in the wrong way for a lot of different reasons. Now, this issue became climatic in 1971 when the Supreme Court of the United States of America outlawed certain forms of employee testing. This decision stated, however, that the use of any professionally developed ability test may be used provided that it is not designed, intended, or used to discriminate. Now, the Supreme Court ruling was trying to eliminate employers and government officials from penciling out people due to mental disabilities within their personality. However, there was many loopholes in this test. For example, in 1993, Target was pressured into paying over $1 million to around 2,500 prospective security guards who refused to take the MMPI, which its purpose is to assess mentally unstable patients of psychiatric wards. Now, the security guards refused to take the test, and they weren't hired. Now, in a lot of corporations, you're required to take personality tests if you're trying to become a manager in other positions. Like in 2005, Rena Center was pressured into a similar agreement where they had to pay an undisclosed amount of money to a series of workers that were trying to become managers, but they were forced to take a personality test. If they scored a certain percentage on certain parts, they refused the position. There are many corporations, however, despite people that disagree with this type of testing, which require taking the personality test prior to being hired for management positions and other positions, such as security guards. It's worth mentioning, however, that the personality test, the Myers-Briggs personality test, is administered at our school, and around 2.5 million Americans every year take this test.
So you might be wondering what makes the Myers-Briggs test so popular. Well, each year, many people take it, and there are many uses and benefits to taking it. Education being a main one. So here at our school, they administer it. So how many of you guys have taken it? That's a lot. I also recently taken it in my last class called Success Strategies. And I know that when we took it, it lists a bunch of potential careers for us. One of them I know being a medical sonographer. How many people have heard of that? A couple? What a medical sonographer is basically someone who just gives sonographs, and they do the whole thing with the, when you're like, an ultrasound for pregnant ladies to see the baby inside. And I thought it was really interesting to know that those people, they only require an associate's degree and they make $65,000 per year by average. So you can learn all sorts of things. You can learn personalities or maybe methods and learning styles. Like, has anyone taken a test just to learn their learning style? I know I have in high school multiple times. Visual learning, auditory, or even hands-on learning, kinesthetic. And there's also reasons to take it for employment purposes. For employment, they do screening jobs for candidates for job placement, and their tests can be used to find out, like, test applied knowledge that they already have, or skills that match the job, or even the commitment of the applicant, and if they're really going to commit to the job. But we can't really be certain for that. And they can also show the preference for what kind of jobs you might be into. Like jobs that require a lot of helping people, like talking to people, or even just massaging people, anything like that. 89 companies out of the US, Fortune 100, is an annual list of 100 public and privately held companies in the United States that utilize the test for recruitment and selection and to help employees understand themselves better. And also they can help their coworkers get along more to see what personality goes with this, instead of having this one person and this other who most likely have conflict with each other. Also clinical uses. Like psychologists, they use personality tests all the time to identify people's problems and their behaviors and traits to help them find better treatment options for therapy, or even some subconscious tendencies they might have, like see the glass half empty, half full. Also personal use. There's marriage and relationship counseling for therapy, and also personal growth, self-realization, or even entertainment. I know personally, I was at a sleepover. It was 2 a.m. We're all bored, had nothing to do, couldn't go to sleep. So we just took a bunch of personality tests to see how each other fits. And also some benefits: self-awareness and development with your personality, or occupational insight to possible career choices, improved group interaction, as I said before, and overall job performance. So you might be wondering, should this really be completely trusted? Well,
so like she was saying, with all these great benefits, you may wonder, why doesn't everybody use this test? Why doesn't every company require you to take them? Well, despite its widespread use, its vast financial success, and being based on the work of Carl Jung, the Myers-Briggs test is highly questioned by the scientific community. Take one of its top uses. Its top use is for job placement, to help you find out what type of job you may be interested in. There's actually no solid evidence to prove that there's a positive relationship between that type of job you're interested in and your job performance. So you might be matched up with being a doctor, but you're a horrible doctor and kill every patient you touch. So, that would definitely be bad. And then like Hannah and everyone were saying, it is a self-report questionnaire. So with this, you are free to answer the questions with any choice you want. And what you can do is you can actually fake your answers depending on what you think the test giver wants you to answer. So I've taken one for Best Buy. It's about a 50 question test, and it's asking how you'll perform in certain customer service situations. So of course I didn't answer completely honestly. I answered what I thought that Best Buy would want, so they would hire me. So with this, it's not exactly an accurate representation of what type of person you are whenever you're applying for a job. The other idea is it does force people into 16 different categories for Myers-Briggs. So with that, they did an early study on the test, and what they did was they asked participants to take the Myers-Briggs test, and then after they asked them to write a few short sentences about what they feel their type would actually be. And a third of the participants actually felt that they were categorized incorrectly by Myers-Briggs. They felt that they were different types on all the categories. And when this typically occurred, the individual was near the midpoint. So with Myers-Briggs, it gives you, it's like basically a number line, and you're either to the left or to the right or the middle. And it categorizes everyone either to the extreme right or the extreme left. There's no room to be, in the middle, or to be 55% extroversion, 45% introversion. So if you score that, you're automatically an extrovert. And that's not true for all situations. You may be an extrovert when it comes to parties, but when it comes to public speaking, you freeze up and you just want to be alone. So that's another thing. It doesn't accurately portray a person's personality. With the validity of it, the research on the Myers-Briggs test, most of it is actually done by companies or published in journals that have some sort of affiliation with Myers-Briggs. So the companies that have put out a lot of the research papers on it actually support training for Myers-Briggs within other organizations. And a lot of the other papers, which are in the Journal of Psychological Type, is edited by Myers-Briggs advocates. So are we getting an actual portrayal of the test, or are we getting a biased view from those people since they are profiting off of the Myers-Briggs test? And one of the other major things is test results can actually change after taking the test a second or third time. So you take it, 5 weeks later you take it again, you can change in different categories. So to put this into perspective, changing one category could take you from being ISTP like Harry Potter to an ISTJ like Severus Snape. Two completely different personalities in a book. Or on the other end, you have Hermione Granger, and then you have Draco Malfoy. So if you've read the Harry Potter books, you know they are completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So as we've all discussed during the whole speech, personality tests are tools that are widely used in the corporate and educational world to help identify personal growth opportunities. They can be used to understand a person's proclivity towards extroversion and introversion, how they use their own perception and judgment differently, and to help identify skills that can be useful for careers or personal development. Nevertheless, you should not rely on the personality test to make all of your important decisions, so you should definitely take it into consideration, but if you take the Myers-Briggs, don't pick one of those careers because it's what it tells you would be good at. The scientific community does question the validity of the test, and our evidence and what we think is, and what some think is, to just approach them with a sense of humor. So they can be an entertaining way to gain a new perspective about yourself. And just so you know, so the comic is, there's a bird saying, there's a personality test that you can take, and it's, we look at this glass, is it half full or half empty? He responds saying, it's more 2/5 full or 3/5 empty. And then asks what type of personality test he has, and the bird says, I'm the way. So definitely just take them with a sense of humor. You can use them as like guidelines, but definitely don't base all of your decisions on them.